Hi everybody, my name is, can you ever hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Salim Khan. I'm a journalist. I'm a professional journalist. I've been a journalist my whole career. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about VR and journalism and how you guys can help with all of that. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about how I got into VR. And then we'll go into a little bit of the history and the secret, mostly secret, it's not really a secret, connection to journalism and how we got to where we are today. So my first experience with VR was, who knows what this is? Battlezone, there you go. 1980 cabinet arcade game. I was a little kid, probably this high. My brother used to take me down to the Bowlerama and we'd do some bowling and then play some video games, lift me up to the cabinet. And the thing about this game in particular was that the cabinet had a visor that you had to look into in order to play the game, and it had two controls, one lever to control each of the tracks. And so when you played it, you were fully in that tank. And let's see, I have a couple more. Oh, good, it worked. The animation. This is what you saw.
Oh, I remember that.
Wow.
I have a YouTube video here, but I don't know if let's see if it'll go, because I might give you a better sense. Can you bring the lights down a little so it's a little clearer on the screen? So this is a fully 3D environment. You can see, you can go back and forth. Those are obstacles, and there's the enemy tanks kept on popping up. This goes on for a while, so if you really want to see, we can come back to it later. And then you can stop that to go on to the next slide. No, it's not advancing. There we go. This was my next encounter with an idea of virtual reality. Tron. Still a little kid. And there was, you remember these, the light cycles? So the idea was there was a computer programmer, a game developer. He got zapped by the evil computer, scanned him in, and it put him into this virtual game world, and he had to essentially fight for his life. Here's the light cycles again for anyone who hasn't seen it. So those light cycles would red. And now you gotta fight. So these renderings took weeks on multi-million-dollar supercomputers. Now you can do it on your desktop, but it was a little crazy. Again, this goes on for a while. If you haven't seen it, you kind of look at it, or we'll just put this up a little later during the Q&A. Fast forward a few years, it's the 90s, I'm in university, and I was working at a company that may have been the first, or it was one of the first 3D real-time data visualization companies. It was taking live market data and rendering it into fully 3D visualizations. At around that same time, that was when the first sort of big wave of VR was occurring. I don't know if you remember those giant headsets, virtuality. It was an awful experience. You would get sick playing those things. It cost about $1,000 an hour to actually run those, so it was completely impractical. This was my part-time job. I was working at this software company, doing documentation and testing, and so this really gave me a sense of what was possible. And I had never forgotten those first couple of encounters with real virtual reality, being the Battlezone, and Ersatz virtual reality, being Tron. And I started thinking, being a journalism student, I was thinking, this really has potential, but it was still really expensive. I had no idea how we would get to be able to bring my world news together with this immersive data world and storytelling. So this, now fast forward again, we're looking at around 2008. This is Nani de la Peña. She's a journalist. She was a fellow at USC Annenberg in Los Angeles, and she wanted to start exploring how you could use virtual reality for journalism. So that's what she did. She spent her own money because she couldn't get anyone to fund it, and she started working on the technology and the software to create a virtual reality journalism experience. So you can see that's one of the early rigs she's testing out. This giant backpack. That's probably actually a later version, the fact that it's in the backpack there. And the experience was called, that she worked on, the first one was called Hunger in LA, and they took live recordings of 911 tapes and ambient audio and assembled it. This was a lineup in LA. People were lining up for food. Someone passed out. He had some kind of a medical episode. And Hunger in LA enabled people to be in this scene. And what they found was that people were, this was in 2011, this actually debuted at Sundance Film Festival. And what they found was that people reacted as though they were there. It wasn't a game, it wasn't a simulation, it wasn't something that you would look at like you would on a TV screen. Once you were in that world, you were in that world. And that's the power of VR. Your brain reacts to it differently than any other experience. Your brain reacts to it as if it's real. It doesn't matter, how low def the experience might be. It taps into the way that your brain behaves. So there's the, one of the early rigs that there's a Hunger in LA experience behind her. I was actually looking for another photo that Nani uses that actually shows the prototype, because this was a sort of, as you can see, it's kind of like a duct tape, kind of hacked together piece of hardware. And so what would happen is that after people started hearing about the work she was doing, she started getting invitations to fly around and present her work and explain what she was doing with it. Well, the school got wind of this at some point, and they said, you can't do that. This is a 50,000, 100,000 piece of custom hardware. Something happens to it, it's gone. So one of the people who was working on the program with her, one of her interns, thought, I'm going to try to see if I can come up with a more portable way to deal with this and create something that's a little more robust, a little more durable, and that you can travel with. That was Palmer Luckey. So, for me and for those of us who know the story in the journalism world, the Oculus Rift has a bit of a sentimental attachment because it was designed for journalism. So that was, like I said, around 2011. And then we have today. I don't know, so when I agreed to do this talk, none of this, these things that happened over the weekend had occurred. I don't know if you've been following it, but the Daily Beast did a story, and they showed that Palmer Luckey had funded an alt-right group, as they call them, politely, to the tune of about $10,000. That was co-founded by two people who had created a Reddit group that was spreading white supremacist, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, pro-Trump memes. in relation to the US election. And this is actually a motherboard story that followed, but the Daily Beast piece, the reporter spoke to Palmer Luckey, or communicated with him. He had confirmed that he was the funder and that he thought that what they were doing was funny. So, 24 hours after that story broke, he actually denied being a person that was behind posts on in the group. He did confirm that he had funded the group, but he said he's not going to vote for Trump, and he is going to vote for Gary Johnson, I think he said. And I don't normally talk about politics, and this actually isn't about politics. He's free to support whomever he wants. He's free to have his own opinions. The problem that this presents, and just for this headline, Palmer Luckey is lying to somebody, it's talking about the contradictions that in Palmer Luckey's statements after the story broke versus before. And the reporter had posted copies of emails where he was confirming some of the facts in the story. So, the problem with this, with the situation, is not that he likes Trump. He's, like I said, he's free to like whoever he wants and vote for whomever he wants. The problem is that this is symptomatic of a problem that I'm sure many of you have seen in developer circles, maybe not so much in Toronto. We're officially the most diverse city in the world. There was just a BBC study that came out at the beginning of the summer that confirmed that. The problem is that when you have a group of people who are responsible for something that is this profound, a technology this profound, it influences the way that the technology is formed and what it becomes and how it's used. And if I've been spending a lot of time at virtual reality events and conferences over the past 2 years, and I've got to say, it's pretty much a monoculture. It doesn't look like Toronto. So, I'll go on to, I don't want to belabor this, but you guys are all part of the solution for this. A lack of diversity and a lack of inclusion in this field could be catastrophic. We don't know where it will go. I'm not using that word lightly. It is essential that we have representation from a spectrum of people in the development of VR, because this technology is so potentially powerful that it is going to shape our actual reality. Just on the weekend I saw a story that Google's automatic cars, its AI cars, will automatically pull over for police if police want to stop your car. So what does that mean for people who maybe tend to have a less than ideal experience with police? That's just one really obvious example, and sort of the long tail of this. Who knows how far that goes? So you guys are responsible for making sure that you hold the people who are developing these technologies accountable, and making sure that you're in there and shaping what this becomes. All right, we'll move on to something a little happier. Who here is an Android developer? Not many? All right. Actually, I should have done this earlier. I just want to get a sense of who's in the room. Who here is a developer, first of all? All right, non-developers? What fields are you in for the non-developers? Business, marketing, education? All right. Well, this will be pretty relevant to you. So, Google is really pushing hard on VR. They believe that mobile is the pathway, not these high-end devices like the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, because it's accessible and the computing power is getting better and better in the handsets. In a few months, There will be devices that have the capability to scan a room and create models. Was Project Tango, now it's just Tango. This is really powerful technology, and these sensors will enable not just developers to use this, but anybody to use this technology. You'll be able to take a photo, of this space, and not only have the imagery, but actually have the physical models. So you can go from something you have in your hand, phone, to creating an immersive experience. And I don't know, maybe not many of you are Android developers, but some of those tools are available now for development. PlayStation VR. This is probably the most crucial VR technology right now, which may sound counterintuitive. But the thing is that there are a lot of people who are developing for VR and developing VR experiences. The market is not there yet. The market is not moving as fast as the development is. And so there's a gap. So there's about 40 million installed base of PlayStations. If PlayStation VR fails, it's going to be devastating for VR. I mean, it could potentially be the end of it. So if any of you are game developers, pay attention to this, and please put your effort into it. Just on the weekend, Shahid Kamal, who's a former interactive entertainment chief globally, he had left, and now he started a studio. He is starting a VR studio, and he said that everything that he's learned in his career about developing video games and about video games is pretty much redundant. So that should give you a sense of what kind of paradigm shift we're talking about when we're moving from 2D representations and screen-based representations to VR. HoloLens, Microsoft. I think we have some people from Microsoft here, right? Yes. So I should probably get you up to talk about this. HoloLens is augmented reality. It is, so you're overlaying visuals, graphics, and the like onto your existing space. The interesting thing about HoloLens is, while a lot of the other approaches to VR have been, and AR, are entertainment, Microsoft seems to be really focusing on productivity and work applications, which is essential, and there's a huge opportunity there, because there is a segment of the population, and early adopters, gamers, and so on, will pursue entertainment experiences, but this is where the future for the rest of us lies. Is Windows Holographic, which is part and parcel of Windows 10. Did I got that right? Good. So this should give you a sense of how crucial Microsoft thinks this technology is. They are trying to ensure that everybody has access to it and everybody is using it. It's going to change the way they do work. This is a NASA Mars experience using HoloLens. It's the Mars office, as they call it. And NASA has been doing this for about a year and a half, 2 years or so, where you can be in your office and put on a HoloLens, and you're on Mars with the rover. They're developing the next Mars rover using HoloLens, and you can actually interact with the models using that. I don't have that slide here. Before I get to that one, I just wanted to make another one of my points here, particular to developers. There's an urgent need for developers to work in this space. It's moving very fast. There's a shortage, frankly. And while that may be true for a lot of industries, to my mind, this is really a crucial thing that I'd like to encourage developers to pursue. Because as I said earlier, the creation of experiences for journalism that enable people to get an understanding of the world that you can't get through reading or watching a video or listening to an audio track. Those are only possible with the skills that all of you have. This right here is a still from The Guardian's 6x9 experience. You can download it on the App Store, or I think it's on the App Store now. It's definitely on Android. It was a simulation of being in solitary confinement, and it's only a few minutes, but it's really, really powerful. It gives you a sense of what it's like to be in that tiny room. It's like, well, I mean, it's a room not much bigger than the space I'm walking around in. About the same size. This was the modeling that occurred and the mapping that occurred to do that. It was done by a company called The Mill in New York. They're an advertising agency, which goes to another point, which is that this is really expensive to do. So it's not only difficult, it's expensive. And there aren't that many organizations right now that can do it. There's a real lack of tools to develop this kind of experience, or any kind of VR experience, even something as simple as 360 video. There's some recent software that is better at stitching imagery, but overall, there's a real lack of tools. And so that may not be problematic for some or all of you, but for people in my industry, journalism, who generally went into journalism because they didn't want to deal with technical things, it's a huge hurdle. And so we need people who have that skill set to start paying attention to this, start developing tools for us, helping us to create these experiences that can enable people to better understand their world. I'm just going to keep it to that right now, and I'll take some questions, and if you have any, I'm happy to talk. Thanks. Questions, comments?
So what is the first step to doing the diversity component that you speak of?
Well, having conversations like this, really. That's where it starts. I've been speaking to a group of people who are in VR, and we're working on putting together an initiative. There's already an initiative called shift.org with 2 I's. They started looking at women in particular. They just actually issued their first 3 fellowships to enable diverse candidates to go to Oculus Connect. And so the problem with sort of industry-based initiatives is that you're drawing on the same pool of people typically, right? Even if they may fit outward ethnic or religious or sexual diversity components, you're still talking about a very thin layer of people who have sort of risen to the top. And that better? Yeah, okay. And so even when you are getting a degree of diversity, in some ways it's almost superficial because you're talking about typically an economic sector of society whose experiences are very similar. people who've had the opportunity to pursue higher education and work in information industries. That's not most people. And so what we need is an effort, an initiative that will go to people before they're in college and university, before high school, start making it clear that there are options to kids in more junior levels of education, grade school even. Getting them exposed to it, planting that seed of an idea, so that they can aspire to something that they maybe never would have thought of. Right? I mean, for me, like I said, I showed you those games and the Trons. Like, I never would have thought that that was something that would come to pass. But here we are, a few decades later, and we can create those worlds.
Bit of a follow-up to that, though. Those are things that we can implement now, but may not necessarily pay off for 10 or 15 years or longer. It's something we can do now. We can implement this right now.
Right. So the comment is that these are sort of long-term efforts, 10 to 15 years. What can we do now? What you can do now is start talking to the people in the industry, like I am, right? Impressing upon them the need and the urgency for it, having the conversations, encouraging them to, by them I mean the companies that are doing this work, to support initiatives and telling them that that's what's needed, that's what you want to see. You want them in your schools, you want them in your libraries, you want after-school programs. A friend of mine just recently went to, just at the beginning of summer, went to Turkey and taught kids in the refugee camps how to create their own 360 experiences. They gave them the tools so they could tell their own stories rather than other people coming in and telling their stories from their own perspective, which is not necessarily going to, sure, thanks. So we're at the beginning of an industry, and it's an important industry, and so it's up to all of us to make sure that the industry becomes something that we would aspire to. And don't just leave it to whomever is working in it right now. Take the time, take the effort, make sure that your kids or your nephews and nieces get an opportunity to explore this.
Following up on that exact point, do you think it's too early now to start teaching kids how to build VR worlds? Is the system there to sort of help? Because to me that would be a good avenue to sort of start tapping into the accessibility of the wider market, is to let youngers and others tell the stories, right around that. Is that there yet?
So the question is whether it's too early to start teaching kids to start building VR worlds, and the answer is no, it's not too early. You can start teaching fundamentals and principles, and there are limited tools that are available that enable people with a lesser degree of technical expertise to create immersive experiences. Well, actually, I'll take this. Something as simple as downloading cardboard camera and taking a photograph with cardboard camera, 360-degree photograph. You get audio in it as well. So it starts planting the seed of an idea of what you can do. There are more technical tools, programming and so on. But again, coming back to the tools, that's something that you guys need to work on, because there's a real lack of them. There are still barriers to creating for VR. Here's another device. This is a Ricoh Theta 360 camera. It's about $350. It takes 360-degree photos. So I'll do that right now. Smile. And that's it. I just took your photos. I'll post this later. So it doesn't have to be something that is an onerous task to teach. you need to start getting people just thinking about it. And once they start thinking about it, then they start exploring possibilities. Any other questions? Yes?
If VR technology were to stay more ubiquitous, how would it shape something, say, during the presentation, like, for example, right? Beyond the gimmick of, like, us being in the audience for the thing, right? How do you think storytelling might change for good or for ill?
Right. So the question is, if VR technology was more ubiquitous, how would it change storytelling in a way that would have impact? A specific example that was given was the US election. There's a debate tonight, and you're actually able to watch that debate in a VR experience, a VR social experience tonight, starting in about 10 minutes. So, how would it change?
Yeah, like that's kind of the obvious gimmick of like the first step is just take and you live out a live scenario. But I'm thinking more like how do you think a campaign is going on, something like that? How can art perspective?
Right. Well, like I said earlier, when you're in VR, the experience, your brain registers it as something real, right? You lack that distance and that filter that sort of lets you just kind of skim by something or dismiss it. And so that immediacy, when you're walking around in your life and something happens around you, you're going to notice it, right? You have an automatic level of additional engagement when you're in VR. It's like you cannot help it. It's physiology. What could that mean? Well, there's a lot of potential scenarios, both good and bad, right? I showed you the Guardian 6x9 experience. You can believe that the editors and producers of that wrestled for a long time about the ethics of producing something like that and the potential for trauma that would occur. That's a whole other realm that I particularly am focused on and I'd like to talk about. I'm not sure that everyone wants to talk about that right now because it's it can get a little dark and depressing, frankly. But the potential to engage people and activate them and make them care about something is multiplied just by the fact that you are putting them somewhere and you're making an experience, a story, something that's going on far more immediate than just something that they might walk by or on a newspaper box or something. You see a story on or a headline.
I'll put it out. In tech, there's only two types of people. There's the haves and the have-nots. If you have the money, you can buy an Oculus Rift. But how do we get stuff like this? Reduce the barrier of entry so the have-nots can be accessible to them as well.
So the question is, how do we reduce the barrier of entry for the have-nots versus the haves who can go out and buy an Oculus Rift or an HTC Vive or any of the numerous high-end multi-$100s, thousands of dollars devices because you do need the hardware for it to run it. So in a sense, that barrier is being reduced day by day. Just the cost of technology is coming down regularly, right? But again, going back to what I was saying before, if you really want to make this accessible, start with the phone. It's like that is probably the best way to get people exposure to it, and start talking to whomever, your school, your children's school, your local library, and start impressing upon them the need for engagement at this level. This is a room full of people who work in an industry that enables you to do a lot of things that a lot of people don't have. That's right. Right, companies like Microsoft, companies like Google, which are really focused on this. You all have contacts, I'm sure. Start talking to them. Tell them that this is something that's important to you and that matters to you. And they are doing their own initiatives for sure, but until they get the feedback from the community, they're not going to know how far to go. They will have their own plans, but if you impress upon them that it's really urgent and really important and it matters to you, you have an opportunity to shape what happens. Any other questions, comments? Oh, one in the back.
Yeah, kind of adding to that question. So, how widespread do you think the market is going to be? Because you get one with premium products, Oculus or HTC Vive, you also get hardware. But then the problem with Google hardware is you don't really get the same experience as you get with HTC Vive or Oculus. And then plus you have like all the countries with like expensive other phones, big wars, and how far do you see it go? And plus, like, kind of like the market right now is kind of already engaged. So, like, how far do you see it? Journalism.
How far do you see it going with journalism? So the question is, how far do I see the market going? How far do I see it going with journalism? And commenting on the sort of disparity between experiences of a cell phone-based experience using Google Cardboard versus Oculus or HTC Vive or the like. I thought I had a slide here. I guess I forgot it. To answer the question about journalism first, it is something that news organizations are pursuing aggressively. The Guardian is one of them, the New York Times is another. USA Today is about to launch a VR series they've been working on for months. Actually, one of the people who's leading that is actually a former game developer. He was a producer at EA, and he went into news because he wanted to do something more than entertainment. He wanted to make his work potentially affect people's lives. And so that will be coming out probably within the next month or so. Museums are actually pursuing VR experiences and AR experiences. I know the Art Gallery of Ontario is working on something. ROM, you may have remembered there was actually an AR experience with the dinosaurs not too long ago using people's phones.
Don't forget real estate agents.
Yeah, well, real estate agents, it's true. I mean, there's also the commercial dimension. And yeah, real estate agents are using it to represent properties and clients. So there are, there's a lot of potential pretty much in every industry for VR and AR and mixed reality, which is, it's augmented reality with which you can interact with essentially. I don't know if you've seen, I didn't put this up, I forgot to. Magic Leap has put out a few videos of their technology. I highly recommend Googling the Star Wars Magic Leap experience. They posted a YouTube video. It's entertaining, but it also gives you a sense of some of the things that are possible. So I'm not sure, have I answered your question, or do you want more? Did I miss something?
Right now, like VR is targeted kind of like gamers, so is it going
Right. VR is targeted toward gamers right now because that is the early adopter segment that's most likely to already have the hardware or be willing to spend to get the hardware to engage in VR. Like I said, it's still expensive. The prices come down a lot. It's not $1,000 an hour anymore, but it's still pretty pricey to be able to buy all the equipment and have a rig that's capable of supporting VR. But the march of technology, as you know, things get more powerful, they get cheaper. This is something that is happening. It's not a fad. It's not something that's going to go away. There's a lot of companies that are spending on this. Just to give you a sense, last year there was something like $700 million investment in all of sort of VR, AR, and so on. This year, just by the first quarter, there had been $1 billion of investment. And so I think by 2020, it's expected to be a $30 billion industry. The estimates vary, but they're all in the tens of billions of dollars. Everybody's pursuing this, and like I said, news organizations as well, because for us, we understand the power of experience. As a journalist, what we're trying to do is put the audience, put the audience of it. Have you ever seen photos of a place, and then you finally go there, and you understand how everything fits together, right? It's very similar to that. You get a sense in VR that you cannot get any other way. And so for journalism, for news, that's the power of it. It enables us to convey ideas and information in a way that has previously been, frankly, impossible. Anyone else? I'm going to get the hook in a second. So I'll be around if anyone wants to talk. Thanks very much.